Hey my ghouls, goblins, and creatures of the abysmal night. I am your divine host, Michaela J. And if you're on my channel and if you're watching this, you're here to experience a series called Gothic Americana, How Haunted Are These Roots? And in today's episode, we're going to be talking about hoodoo, voodoo, and kind of just like witchy goodness, which I personally like. It's going to be a little bit different this time because instead of being more of an educational one, I'm going to speak a lot more of my personal experience because growing up in the South, especially in the Bible Belt, and being of the African diaspora descent, I kind of have a lot of interactions with hoodoo culture specifically. Another quick note, I'm sorry that this episode is like a week late. Personally, I haven't been feeling myself lately, so that's kind of why today's episode is going to be slightly different. I'm going to be doing practices that make me feel good and kind of just talk about what I've seen growing up here and what I've kind of learned are those practices and who can do it and whatnot. So if you're into that, which you should, and just kind of understanding, you know, spirituality down here, then join me for this haunting. Even though this video is going to be more on my experience and stuff, I am going to just talk a little bit about the difference between hoodoo, voodoo, and just a little bit of, you know, witchy history. So in America, we kind of have a bad relation with witches, and that's mostly because of the puritanical, you know, Christian settlers or colonizers, more like it, when they came here. And we've all heard about what happened up north with the Salem witch trials and how those women were, you know, brutally murdered and how that whole thing was big hysteria. But don't get it twisted, the South had it too. So there's been witch trials in South Carolina and colonial Virginia that have been documented, and the one in the VA has been, you know, of interest to me because that's where I'm from. And I also lived over on that side for a little bit, and I just, you know, didn't know it really happened over there. So when I kind of was researching this, I was like, oh, interesting. But the witches there were like really, they were basically demonizing these women, especially if they didn't conform to that like Christian and puritanical ways. So, and we know that a lot of these women weren't actually practices of witchcraft at all. Really, some of them may have been, but most of them primarily weren't, and they just kind of wanted to get them out of their community. It's like getting rid of the bad seed, almost, if you will. Not only pertain to the women in that area, this also pertained to the Native Americans, specifically the Powhatan or Algonquian, I hope I pronounced that right. People in the area, they didn't, you know, these colonizers, settlers, or whatever you want to call them, didn't understand their practices, and because of that, and rituals, and because of that, they just demonized them to be like devil worshippers, because in Christianity, at least the way they were taught Christianity, that was the two main things. You're either a person of God or you were for the devil. No in between. And this also extended to the African people that, you know, they stole and brought in. So, and this is mostly, you know, in the West African and like the kind of mid-region of Africa where voodoo practices were especially alive. And today you can find a mix of voodoo and some Native American rituals and stuff, which brings us kind of to the South and how voodoo, hoodoo, and root work kind of all intertwine. Let's get this straight. Voodoo and hoodoo are not at all the same. They got stuff in common, but they're not the same. So voodoo is hell of a lot more exclusive than that of hoodoo. So voodoo then is actually a religion and not at all accurately portrayed in the media. It is not this evil fear-mongering thing, but due to racism and all that, we get why it's portrayed that way. So it originates from Africa, America, and the Caribbean. And there's three big different divinations of this. There's the West African one, the Haitian one, and then the Louisianan voodoo. I believe the West African one is known as Voodoo, and Haitian is Voodoo, but with like a U. And then Louisiana is voodoo. And today I'll be talking more about the Louisianan voodoo because it's in the South. So So voodoo is a closed practice and you have to be initiated into it. And like other religions, there's spirits like such as the Lao, and then there's like a greater God. And the belief is that spirits are the ones that directly interact with you rather than God. So in voodoo, there is a clergy. There's the Hugan, who are the priests, and the Mambo, which are the priestess. And one of the most famous voodoo queen is Marie Laveau, who helped her community greatly by like taking care and feeding children, but it is a closed practice, and I would not want anyone to get involved with that unless you are initiated in, because it does backfire, and speaking to their spirits will have consequences for you. Now compare this to hoodoo, which I do know or have a better understanding on, because it's based on the African diaspora. So if you're not black, hoodoo will not work for you. If you're not black and if you're not a descendant from slaves, it ain't gonna work, boo. Hoodoo is very, very heavy on ancestral work and using your bloodline for your practices. So just connecting and talking to your ancestors as a direct descendant. And the interesting about hoodoo is that black people all over the country practice it without realizing it. But because I'm in the Bible Belt, and because the Bible Belt is heavy in the South, you'll find that these practices are used a lot more here, especially within the Baptist churches. And this is where I'm coming from. You see, slaves from back then had to hide a lot of these practices from their slave owners, and instead of basically being beaten and die for their beliefs, they just found a way to intertwine them with Christianity to just keep themselves afloat. And hoodoo will use a lot of root work and conjure work, where you're kind of using the natural world as a way to communicate and get what you need to be done basically. So that was my quick explanation of voodoo and hoodoo in the South. And like I was saying, I've been feeling a bit out of it, so I would like to now show you some practices that I do that are low-key related, and just talk about things that I've observed down here. So let's get to getting. So the first thing I do when I feel kind of down and just not myself is I do like to light a candle. I just got this really cool candle from the store that smells so much like autumn, and I also have these dried up leaves. This dried up rose that I've kind of, saved, and I crushed up the petals and I put them into the wax. That way it kind of gives like a more spooky, cool look for this month of October, but also it just smells a little bit better, and I just feel good kind of just crushing and getting rid of some old dead stuff. And using roses is always akin to using like love spells and stuff. For my witches who have deities and stuff, we know that like using roses is usually a sign of like Aphrodite and giving thanks and praise to her and stuff like that. But since I'm not trying to hex anyone to fall in love with me, it's more of a spell of self-love. And by crushing, this dead rose, instead of, using it for something else, I'm still kind of embracing its beauty, even though others might not see it. I don't know. I just like that little reminder of myself of, even though you may not feel your best, know that you're still beautiful and have purpose in life. And I just use it to get rid of my dead skin and things that have been bothering me. So it's just like a deeper cleansing. And when doing this, I might recite something from Psalms, which, fun fact, talking about hoodoo and stuff like that, a lot of Psalm verses are used when practicing, because they just have a great meaning and stuff. And I want to clarify something. Hoodoo is a spiritual practice. You don't necessarily have to believe in a god or anything like that, but there is a lot of connection to it. So a lot of people who, especially black people who practice hoodoo, are Christians as well, and those practices just go hand in hand. I know that my grandmothers and stuff, growing up in the Baptist church, there was just small hoodoo things that kind of floating around, the whole praise dances and catching the Holy Ghost especially. And then there's some practices that we just kept outside the house, sweeping out dirt out the front door. That way, you don't leave any dirt inside. Then, of course, there is the practice of manifestation, which I find a lot of people, especially on TikTok, are now doing. And and my family would do this in ways of like writing down stuff or just speaking it into existence and working towards that goal. So I found that very interesting. Other hoodoo things. So enough of that rambling. So this body scrub is very much a fall-ish type of scent, and it's made of brown sugar, coconut oil, and honey. And honey is used a lot in hoodoo as more of like a love spell. I find that, I don't know, maybe it's just my age or whatever, but I find that there's a lot of spells that have to do with love and whatnot. And honey is interesting because you can put honey on your lips and think of someone and just like say their name a couple of times, and you know, sweet like honey, and they'll fall in love with you. And it's funny because I remember over quarantine, I always heard that if you like swallowed raw honey, like your throat would feel better and stuff like that. And of course, after I was like, oh my god, my throat was hurting during the panorama, and I was like, damn, I need to like eat some honey. And so I did, but like I also used honey as like a lip scrub and stuff like that. And I remember I would think of certain people, and I remember I specifically wanted to have this person talk to me and come back into my life, and they did. So I'm not saying that you need to hex people by doing that. I'm just saying it does work sometimes. So then the next thing that I do that's kind of for my skin and hair that I haven't done in a while is that I make rose water. And I love making rose water for like my hair and skin and stuff. It just makes me smell good and it makes me feel good doing it. So that's why I like to do it. And again, roses are used for love, and I'm using this for self-love. All the romantic spirits and deities should be very proud of me. I find it interesting. The older I've gotten, I don't know, I just find that like love goddesses or goddesses of beauty and femininity and stuff have kind of related a lot more, and just embracing that femininity has kind of helped me with my confidence and stuff. So. But anyway, back to the practices. So I like to just put rose water in my hair to just make it feel good and stuff like that. And to do this, I just, get a pot, fill it with water, pluck the roses, put them in there, stir them for a little bit. I like to add lavender in there just for another essential oil blend. And lavender is known to be relaxing. So that's why I put it in there as well. I think it's really funny because people always say that like, oh, witchcraft and like spirituality and astrology, they're not real and stuff like that, and there's no basis in it. But a lot of it is kind of based on science. If you don't have to believe in the gods or that like the stars align and like tell you your future or whatever. I'm not telling you to do that, but you gotta admit it is cool how like our ancestors figured this stuff out. Just like, oh, well, these certain like roots work here, and like we'll heal this, and like this herbs for that, and like, oh, lavender, the smell can help you relax. It's just very fascinating to me that we figured this out and we still practice it today. It kind of shows that we really are our ancestors in a way. And I love to put it in my hair and like massage it in. And there's another thing that's interesting in the whole voodoo kind of folklore type thing. You don't let people touch your hair, especially two types of people or two people in your hair at once, especially if they don't have your best interest, because they will kind of rob you of your joy. Hair is a very sacred practice in many cultures, obviously, especially for the African diaspora, and even in some or most indigenous cultures. As you see, if they have 3 braids, it's like connecting your soul, mind, and spirit, I believe, or it's mind, body, and spirit. Please correct me if I'm wrong on that. And I find that the more I like let myself do my hair and not let other people touch it, and the more I like massage and heal it, my hair's gotten a lot better and it's healing from the damage. And as you can see, it's protected now, so that way I can't mess with it when I'm stressed, and so that other people can't touch and mess with it. So when you're done with the rose water, you of course want to pour it out, and I now have that beautiful like rosy tinted color that I'm showing you in my wine glass. I'm sorry I ran out of mason jars, but I will put it in my spray bottle and put that in the fridge until I'm ready to use it to preserve it. But I wanted to just thank you guys for kind of hanging out with me and doing these practices and stuff. Next week I will be talking about vampires and all their bloody glory. If you want to see more of my little face or actually get a better breakdown of how to make this stuff, I will be posting it on my TikTok pages, which is linked down below. Anyway, my ghouls, goblins, and creatures at the abysmal night, I will be haunting y'all later.